On this episode of the I2I Forum podcast, Shaun Bennie, FinTech Program Director, with his insights on IR35, how to remobilize programs, projects, and failing initiatives, and also how you can increase your value in the marketplace and work on increasing your day rate, even in today's market. All this and more on the I2I Forum podcast. Welcome to the I2I podcast, and this is the I2I Forum, and today we're I2I with Shaun Bennie. Now, Shaun, we're going to get to know a lot more about you, and we've had a lot of conversations that are ongoing, but we were just talking just briefly about, you were talking about the IR35 and the impact that's having on your decision about being in the marketplace. If you want to expand on that, please.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to have a chat with you, Marcellus. So yes, at the minute, it's I've kind of reached on my journey this fork in the road as to whether I continue with what I've done for the last 25 years, and that's primarily contracted in London as a consultant. The landscape has obviously changed over the last couple of years since the introduction of IR35, and so securing a new contract or consultancy role within London in financial services, where I specialise, is where the market is at, and the barrier to entry is already there. The market is not incredibly busy at this point, so contracts are scarce. But then you've also got the barrier to entry around IR35. And as we know, IR35 has changed the contractor landscape in terms of income. So if you're inside of IR35, it's become a substantial disadvantage. So the government has obviously disincentivized it. Contracting certainly in financial services, where the money was, through the introduction of IR35. So not only are the taxes and the levies that they put on that exceptionally high, you also don't get the benefits of being a full-time employee. So the logic is that it would be better to be a full-time employee than be inside of IR35. Yeah. You get more benefits. You get the benefits of medical insurance and all of the other things that go with that. So when you are inside of R35, you don't get the same. So right now, I'm kind of making a decision. I've made a decision formally, is that I'm going to move more into like a consulting coaching business.
Yeah.
And that addresses the R35 issue, because the R35 issue is about a single client. If you have a single client, and essentially that would make you essentially the work that you would do for that client would be the equivalent of what a full-time employee would do if a full-time employee was employed to do that function. Yeah. And so, that's how R35 works. It's about the measure of what you're doing as a full-time employee. So if you step away from that and you do consulting and coaching around a number of businesses, 2, 3, or 4, you don't have the same measure of in an IR outside of R35.
Isn't there something in the fact that the way the legislation is written, that organizations are afraid to classify people as outside, as well as selfishly, there's got to be some motivation for them to have somebody inside IR35 because they don't want a full-time employee, but they want the flexibility to be able to dismiss somebody and not offer the extra benefits.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we have in IR35, we have what they call blanketing. And blanketing is where the company, and specifically the HR department, doesn't want the aggro of dealing with in and outside of IR35. So what they do is they just do a blanketing policy of saying everything that they do is inside of IR35 and you can take it or leave it. And it's there's a lot of companies, and certainly HR departments have taken that because it's just the route of least resistance. To be fair, it's less work for them. They don't need to, because when you classify outside of IR35, there's a whole bunch of additional work that a company needs to do to be able to justify the fact that it's an outside of IR35 role. And to go through that is just, it's HR intensive. There's a lot of things that they got to do. So they just blanket it. And they, if you want the role, you take it. If you don't, they'll find somebody else.
Because the thing is, I found also that I even was in a position where I had IR35 insurance. And that meant that this role, quite clearly on the CEST, or the quote the CEST, was that it's outside because I have multiple clients, et cetera, et cetera. But the companies were too afraid of even saying that I'm outside, even though I had insurance of £200,000 that if the inland revenue was to find that it was inside, that I had insurance to cover all of their costs. But they're looking at staying beneath the radar. And so what I'd also discovered is it's not just that. There's some of the capabilities within the organizations, even down to the onboarding. So I recently had an I2I session with a guy, Jude Iboji, and we were talking about the onboarding process, and that joining a lot of these organizations, there are things that are missing. And one of them was the onboarding process, because now with this IR35, people who don't understand it, they're afraid to, well, I can't tell you how the company runs because it might make us fall foul of IR35. What? So I'm expected to be like some kind of psychic when I join without any real induction, you know what I mean? Without any real onboarding. And then they wonder why the contractors maybe aren't able to deliver that level of value. So in your experience, what are some of the things, you can expand on the onboarding process, but what are some of the things that you find that are missing when you join an organization in your role?
Can you just hone in a little bit on where you're going with the question? Are you talking about from a joining perspective, or are you talking about from a once you're in their perspective and you start digging under the covers?
No, so once you're actually, when you join, so before you've gotten to dig and get under the covers, you've had the interview, the conversations, we want you on board, you land, and they, all of a sudden, it's like Kansas, right? It's kind of like, instead of it being black and white, back in old Kansas, you're in the land of Oz, it's all full color, but it ain't pretty.
No.
So what are some of the things that you've noticed when you land and kind of get the...
So yeah, in joining, the general rule of thumb is that when you join, and certainly in my experience, because of the roles that I cover and the value that I add, when they bring me in, it's generally chaos. It's they're not delivering. It's the programs are behind. They're spending more money than what they should. There's delays. They can't get certain things through. So it is generally a crazy place to be. It's very rarely that I've dropped into any project, strangely enough. I think the only ones where it's been an easy entry into it is where I've been there from the beginning. So, if I've contracted with a company and they brought me in to fix something and they recognize the value of what I do, they would generally ease me into the next project in the same organization. So I've been very lucky in that way. When I've joined companies, and you look at my track record, is I've gone in as I've been parachuted into helping fix a problem that they've got, into bringing a program of work or bringing a project back on track so that it's delivering to budget, to time, with resources, etc. And what they'll do is that when I've demonstrated the value within helping them, generally they will move me onto a new project. So if they've got a new piece of work, they'll push me straight into that because they know that the setup will be structured in the right way. It'll be set up to deliver. It'll have the right resourcing. The spend will be within margins of error. But generally on a new contract, it's always a tough start.
So what are the things that they broadly bring you in to fix? Where do they normally say, this is a Shaun-shaped problem?
Yeah, so I think if you're not aware, my real focus is technology. So a lot of the areas where my core skill set is in full stack technology, software development, infrastructure services. And what they would do is that they would have a transformation program that's been going on. They would have gone through the initiation phase. That the project would have been implemented. They'd have employed quite a substantial number, the program and project team at that point, and it doesn't go well. They get into the early phases of the project. They don't deliver on time. They don't have the planning right. They haven't got the head count right. They've got some missing pieces of the jigsaw. And what that generally does is it introduces delays. And at the beginning of the project, it's essentially not a really good time you want to run into delays. Delays in the end are a lot easier because you focus on actually finishing rather than starting. So you would get into the early phases of the project, and the wheels would start coming off early, and that would obviously raise all the concerns within the organization about whether they should continue with this project. So that decision becomes key, because if you're already starting to hemorrhage money and you already got an overspend 2, 3, or 4 months into the program, the big question right up front becomes, should we carry on with this? Because if we are already 10% or 15 or 20% behind budget because of the way that it's been stood up, why would we, and we're only 4 months in of a year's piece of work and we're already 15% behind, we're already late and we're already overspending, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
So there's a couple things here that I'd like to unpack with you. So number one is because you did a lot of work in the banking industry where it is deliver or die. Yeah?
Indeed.
They have, from my experience, a lower tolerance for overspend and things being dragged out without producing results. There are exceptions. But the other thing is, what do you think prevents the organizations? Because most of these people, they know the basics of project, program, portfolio management. They know what documents, what processes need to be done to avoid this overspend thing. And what do you think prevents organizations from just doing it right in the first place?
I'm not sure I agree with you. It's that my experience is that even with teams, and I mean, I've been very lucky in my career because the biggest focus of the type of institution that I've worked for is historically been large investment bank. And investment banking, as you say, has a propensity to be very unforgiving, in delays, because what they do is they pay top rate, and what they do is they expect the best outcome, and they really are brutal about it. What you do get though is that you do get deep pockets. So we're talking about 20, anything from 5 to 35, 40 million pound investment programs. So those pockets are deep. So if they're having problems up front within the delivery and within the transformation that they're trying to implement across their business, a 10% overspend in the first 6 months is significant, but it's not irrecoverable. So they have that ability to reevaluate pretty quickly at the beginning in the first, let's say, 3 to 6 months, and then make a decision about what they want to do. And the program will have a sufficient amount of budget to cater for that kind of hit to the cost and to the delivery cycle. So where I would come in is that if I wasn't in as part of the initiation, they would bring me in with a track record of recovery. And of course, like everything, when you land in a project recovery phase, you have 90 days to turn it around. You have a 90-day window. And anybody who's looking to drop into an organization and to recover a project or a piece of work, the magic number is 90 days. If you haven't turned that project around in 90 days, you're not going to. You're done. Right? So the question you have when you ask yourself of hitting the ground running on a recovery is that everything that's in front of you today, you can't change and you shouldn't try, right? What you've got to do is you've got to look at what you can influence, because on any program or any project, trying to manage today and tomorrow is an absolute pointless exercise. You have to let it go and you have to let it be. You have to let it play out in the way that it's going to play out. You have to be very clear with your sponsors and the people that you're working for that that is going to be the case. And you need to give them that, you need to set that expectation that it's going to take you 90 days to turn this around. And that's what you have, period, right? If you're going to turn around, you have that 90 days. So what you can do is you are managing what is happening in front of you, but you can't change it. Like, you cannot change what happens tomorrow unless you stop everything, that's a big ask. And that would probably, in my experience, not be the right thing to do. What you need to do is you would need to let that play out. But what you have to do is you have to give a 90-day view of the things that you're going to be doing in the next 90 days, starting on day one, of what day 91 is going to look like. Right? Day 91 is going to look very different than day 91 does in the plan today. And and that's the key. And the key is to understanding what levers and what things that you're going to do in order to make sure that on day 91, when you get there, the plan that you've implemented will be at that point on day 91. And it won't be where the plan currently is on day 91. And then the implementing of those changes about what you're going to change and how you're going to influence that. And essentially, from a program and a project management perspective, project management is slightly different. From a program management perspective, it's a little bit easier to do that, because essentially what you're doing is that you are delivering, your delivery timeline starts on day 91, and you're going to spend the next 90 days fixing that to bring that all in. The only question you're going to answer is, can you keep the program or the project on the same timeline that they initially had by implementing things that can help accelerate. Reduce cost, accelerate, bring in the right people, do the right things, shortcut certain things. Maybe there was some fat within the original program that you can actually take out. You could short circuit, or if you're going to write really complicated documents, just pare them down a little bit and look at what is exactly needed in those documents, rather than padding them out and making them, 100 pages, make them 30 pages. And that goes down to critical thinking. It's like, just pare it back to the absolute things that you need and see what you have to do in order to drop in on day 91 and say, I've got a plan that will still deliver. It'll deliver what you want, when you want, how you want, but it's going to be 10% over budget, which is within the original threshold of the program that you originally set out to do. Because you've always got plus or minus on your budgets, right? If your original sponsor and program manager or project manager has done their work properly, they would have put in those margins of error within your budget. And so, if you do come in early and you do take that 90 days, you need to make sure that 90 days, as much as you can still be within that program's delivery tolerances. So just to go back a little bit to your question, is that my use case, or generally when I come in, it's, because I've been sourced by one of my core groups. So, being in financial services tech, and specifically with investment banking for the last 25 years, there really is, like, people think that there's a lot of people in the city that does this. They're actually not. It is that group of people is essentially, when you've been there for 25 years, you can reach out and touch, those people, because you've seen so many programs and so many large projects delivered in large banks. You can almost be sure that you will know who those people are in those programs that are doing it. And if they are out looking in the world of technology delivery, they will know the names of the people who they would want to bring in, or they would want on their team, if if they had this problem. And my name happens to be one of those that generally come up. And when I say generally come up, I mean, I have been part of some recoveries within the city, but ultimately for me, it's been about adding value for extended periods of time. So if you look at my track record, for example, and of how long I've spent in institutions, like the shortest time I've spent in an investment bank where I've been embedded in the organization has been 3 years. So, I was 3 years at JP Morgan. I was 5 years at Royal Bank of Scotland. I was 5 years at Royal Bank of Canada. And what that talks to is the fact that they brought me in to do something specific, understood the value that I had, and retained my services over a longer period of time. So there's a lot of benefits of being good at understanding programs and how to recover them. It's a really good skill set to have, because if you become known in the industry as somebody who understands how to recover projects, if you're out of work, it's not difficult to get back into work. Because when people realize that you become available and that word gets out within that small community, as I call it, I mean, it's a lot of people, but you generally get to know a lot of those people by name. And when you do become available, there could be 20, well, back then, there could be 20 projects out there that needed somebody to help them dig them out of a hole. And so it would be reasonably easy for me to find a new contract. I mean, for 20... Up until I dropped out of the city and I moved to the investment fund management business that I've been doing for the last couple of years, there were a lot of projects that were running in the city, and it wasn't difficult to find a project that they had difficulty with, and then they would parachute you in, and then you'd end up staying there for like 3 years. It's just how it worked, right? But a good exercise is, if you're a good project program manager and you really know your stuff, and project recovery is part of your toolbox, it is not difficult. It really isn't, especially if your name gets out there and people know you for that.
We're gonna kind of close it out, but I guess for me, the main thing is right now is, so people are entering the space after hearing what you've said, and they want to kind of advance themselves and build their own career and profile in that space. What are some of the things that you did that you'd recommend them doing to either increase their profile, increase the level of value that they have in the marketplace, and ultimately to the point where people recognize that value and are willing to compensate them accordingly, so they can really increase their day rate if they're going into that consultancy space?
Well, I think there's a couple of things I could call out in the space. One of them is to become assertive. It's to be very clear about the value that you can add and be confident in the delivery of that value. Off of the back of that, you need a reasonably decent toolbox of skills that would allow you to be confident in that space. A large part about entering a business or entering a program or a project is being confident in your ability to stand this up and to do it in such a way that it works. And that is one of the key things, right? Is that anybody can be a project manager, but it's being a good project manager that differentiates you from those that just tick boxes to those that are confident in their ability in understanding how to drive it forward. And so confidence, project management, it comes with a level of confidence, because there is a drive into the business that you need to do. You're essentially taking, I'll draw an analogy like a horse and cart. As a project manager, transformation program manager, you're the horse pulling the cart, right? If you are not confident about pulling the cart and you don't have the skills and the strengths to do that, you can't be pulling the cart. It's not going to go as quickly or as, and it's just not going to work coherently. And inherently, project management and program management are about taking a business on a journey, knowing what boxes to tick, what people to employ, what process to put in place, what reporting. Everything that project management does, you need a coherent skill set that would allow you to piece all those parts of the jigsaw puzzle together, right? My recommendation to people is to go and get that, at least that learning in, understand the basic principles, go get the learning in for project program management, etc. It's not difficult. It's just something you need to concentrate on and develop your ability over. But as you go through your career, is a lot of what clients want and a lot of their expectation. And certainly if you get into the realms of investment banking, you really need to have nerves of steel, right? And you need to be confident in your ability, and you need to stand behind that. And accountability is an absolute. Because if you say you can do this, you need to deliver. And if you don't deliver, you need to put up your hands and say, I can't do this. And then you need to figure it out with the people that you're working for and your sponsors together. You can't be in denial of it. If you've taken on something, that's like they say, if you've bitten off more than you can chew, a hasty retreat is always better than a bad stand. Right, is to kind of acknowledge that and figure out with the people around you. You'll find a lot of the time that people will support you in that, because it's better to say I don't know than to pretend that you do and break it. Don't do that. Right. And this is a big thing because there's a large ego involved in this as well. And it's very difficult for people. It's a lesson that was very hard for me to learn. In my early days of delivering projects, my sponsors used to accuse me of being a know-it-all because I would try and answer every question. Right? Instead of saying to some of the questions that I couldn't answer, I don't know, I'll go and find the answer and I'll come back to you with it. And that's exactly the same thing as if you're in over your head on a project or a program of work or something that you don't understand, rather sit down and have a conversation about that than pretend or try and convince your sponsors and the people that you're working for that you do know, but you don't. Because they can help you if you don't know, but they can't help you if you break it. They're just the classics. So, there's a lot of nuggets that you can teach people, but the one lesson you can learn early is if you don't know, put your hands up and say, I don't know, I'll go and figure it out, or I don't know, can you help me through this journey? It's, because it allows everybody just to make informed decisions. And yes, that may have a negative effect on the perception of you, but at least you're learning the lesson, right? It's better to learn the lesson, and to learn the lesson saying I don't know than to pretend you do and have the wheels come off, because it doesn't just affect you, it affects your client that you're working for and the company that you work for as well. That the failure of that particular project or program of work will have a significant impact on that business and essentially the people that are part of that project. And these are things that people need to recognize rather than, just blindly continuing knowing that they're out of their depth. It's just not worth it. And you don't learn anything that way. I'm not quite sure anybody learns anything that way, but there are better ways of learning that, and there are better ways of taking your client on that journey with you. If you don't know, they will respect you more as well, and you will learn the lesson quicker as well.
Well, thank you so much for that. We're going to close out here because there's a lot for us to unpack and to probably go into other discussions, because we've covered IR35, we've covered you going in, the challenges that are faced, the tips that you have for people. But there's also more I want to kind of unpack with you in future conversations around how organizations approach the use of their technology and what some of the capabilities are that you've experienced that organizations could potentially put more focus on to prepare themselves for the changes that are happening in the technology space. But again, Shaun, your information will be posted at the kind of the outro of the podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out to speak with us and share your knowledge and your insights today.
Thank you for having me, Marcellus.